is exciting. So we're going to have a chat to do with Pride Month, celebrating all things Pride in Quins. So this is exciting that we get to like chat about it here. So yeah, what are your thoughts on the whole thing?
I think it's super cool that we've been asked to do this. Actually, I think obviously I joined Harlequins this season, but like even it's testimony to the fact that we're doing this as to how, you know, Quins want us to talk about these kind of things, because I think you need to start making it be in the forefront of people's minds, and so people feel it's gradually moving into the normality, if that makes sense. But there's lots of work still to be done, obviously, but the fact that, you know, we did like the rainbow laces, and Quins held the first LGBT fixture, wasn't it, in February, was it, this year? You know, and you look on the social media and you got the rainbow signature on both the full Quins logo and also the women. So I think it's great. Like, it's great that we're here being able to do this, to be honest. I don't know if they've done these conversations before, but, you know, the fact that, you know, Quins is pushing forward the boundaries in regards to wanting to talk about stuff, because I think it does need to be talked about, because it's you know, it's something which people still feel a bit awkward about, maybe. So yeah, I'm hopeful that, you know, it kind of opens a few eyes or a few conversations with other people. So
definitely, like every conversation and every kind of little video or people showing their support does break down those barriers. Like we had obviously our teammate Jade like release her story through Harlequins Women there a little while back about her coming out story and the support network within rugby and things like that. So such a lovely story to hear. I've had also teammates in Ireland like share their same story, like really publicly, you know, especially when you're such a public figure and aligned with a team like Harlequins, you know, that has such a big name in global rugby. To be talking about this, it's really an honor to be part of it. So yeah,
I think it definitely helps people feel comfortable kind of being themselves, or, you know, don't feel it's an issue or at all, really, for them to be able to talk about it in such an open way. I think, yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, I think Jade's story is so nice. Her and her missus are amazing. They're such a lovely couple.
Yeah.
So nice to see that.
I know, you know their story of like how they proposed to each other, like they both proposed to each other on the same day. Like it's just such a happy thing.
So cute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because we were talking to them. So my girlfriend and I were talking to them at the big game, because I think it was that weekend that they proposed. So we were talking to them about, oh, what you doing? And they were like, oh, we're going for an early morning walk. And we were like, like, hoping, you know, maybe. But yeah, they're such a super cute couple. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so lovely. So I'd like to ask you like about, I don't know, what's been your experience like within rugby, and you know, do you have stories about like coming out to your team or even coming out to your family? Like what's been your experience, and has rugby like played a part in that?
So when I say coming out, like for me, I've only realized, and I say this to people, when I say this to people, they're like, what? Like, I only realized that I was gay about when I was about 25. So quite late, you know, if you consider, and I think that's a really good sign that it was late, considering now. So people are coming out earlier because they feel they can, or they realize it sooner. But I mean, for me, I grew up in Hampshire, countryside, Roman Catholic family, nothing against that, but just, you know, went to an all-girls school, but not that means anything, but, you know.
No, traditionally it's
traditionally, but not at all, like didn't have any exposure to anything, was just like, oh, there were people I was really fond of being close friends with, but my brain didn't make the link between maybe you fancy them. It was just like, oh, okay, like, you really like that person and you want to be like them or be close to them, but still, you know, had boyfriends, you know, carried on like that. And then it wasn't until I came to London, actually. So I went to Cardiff Uni, still again, you know, had a bit more exposure, because then I was living in a city of, you know, like gay bars and stuff, but we didn't really go to them because I didn't hang out with people that were gay, not through my, you know, it just happened to be that way. And then coming to London, actually, I think, and joining the police in London, it kind of increased my eyes and my exposure maybe to to LGBTQ community, and actually a lot more people who were gay, and you'd speak to them, and then I'd slowly realize, you know, when actually there was a girl that I was working with that I quite liked again, and then she showed interest back, and then it kind of clicked, and I was like, oh, right. Like, it's weird, like I was trying to say it to people, it's not like I, you know, and I've felt that way from a young age. Like, I remember really, really young and really admiring my riding instructor and stuff like that, who was a girl. And so I guess from a young age, if I look back now, I can go, well, all the signs were there, I guess. Yeah. You know, hindsight is great, but because I guess because I'd never had that exposure or been near that world, really, just because of my circumstances of where I was, my body, I didn't realize, you know, I didn't unlock that side to me. So, and I guess over the last like 9 years that I have been out, I've seen a major change in, you know, people talking more openly about it. You know, Pride is now huge in London. Like, you have, you know, all the main brands like Adidas putting, you know, out clothing with rainbows on and stuff like that. And I think, you know, it's just getting it not used to, but making people feel that environment of, you know, this is here. We're all here for together. If you feel, you know, come to Pride, you know, everyone's welcome, and just have that environment, you know, that community around you, and just see if you're comfortable or how you feel. Or because I definitely think that everyone is on a sliding scale. Like, I don't think that people are, you know, gay, bi, straight. I think everyone is on a sliding scale, as everyone is on all personalities. If you know, extrovert, introvert, you know, some people are really extrovert in some scenarios, and, you know, I think everything is a sliding scale. So I think definitely people have become more aware of it, and I think that helps more people come out sooner. So, you know, I speak to people now younger than me, and they're like, oh no, I've been out or realized I was gay when I was like 15, and I think it's been spoken about a lot more at schools, and I think it's great that people can realize themselves sooner. And that's of no fault to my upbringing or family. You know, had an amazing childhood, and you know, coming out to my family, they were amazing, like, so like happy almost. I remember I told my younger sister it was at my brother's house party. So I told my mum on Christmas Day, standard, being like,
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, hi, Merry Christmas. I've had a really good day. By the way, I really need to tell you something, Mum.
Love it.
And got her by herself and was like, so, got something to tell you. She's like, yeah. And I was like, so, think I may be gay. And she's like, okay, cool. And I was like, okay, cool. So, and then I was like, you know, don't tell the others, like my siblings, because I'm one of 4. You know, I want to see how I feel, and, you know, don't tell Dad. Well, obviously she's going to tell Dad because they're married. So, and then Dad, really cute, like, and I'd never seen that, you know, side to him or anything, but he like collared me. That sounds the wrong word. He spoke to me the next day, and like, just when we were by ourselves, and he's like, I'll always love you no matter what. So I had a great, you know, support network there for my family. Amazing. And then I remember when I finally felt that I could tell my family, I remember distinctly, I was at my brother's house party, and was talking with my little sister, and we were next to the snack table, which is relevant in a little bit. It wasn't that I always sit by the snack table. That would be very, I mean, maybe. Yeah. So the party's at, and was telling my sister, and I was like, so I have to tell you something. She's like, yeah. And I was like, I'm gay. And she was like, tears, like, so glad you could finally tell me, yada, 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 like, really supportive. And then just at that time, my brother leant through us to get a snack. And he's like, you're right. And I was like, Ed, you know I'm gay, right? And he looked at me and was like, yeah. And then just walked off. And I was like, cool. So
done, tick, tick.
Yeah. So they, I think, like, speaking to them now, they were like, we always wondered if you were. And you know, it was just so nice that straight away they were like, yeah, cool, that's just Lydia. Like,
did you find that?
Go on.
You know, she was like, oh, you could finally tell me, or we always thought you might be. Like, were you like, well, I didn't think that.
Yeah. So I was like, I said to my brother, I was like, and my siblings, I was like, well, you could have told me. They were like, well, yeah, you know, we wanted you to just kind of find it out. Like, I distinctly remember my mum in my car, and this shows you mother's intuition. Like, I was like 16 and she was driving me home from school. And I remember this, she turned to me and went, so do you think darling, that maybe you're gay? And I was like, no, like, no. And then, like, obviously later, she never said I told you so, but I was like, obviously she could see, I don't know what it was, but she could obviously see that maybe I wasn't quite being the full Lydia. Like I said, you know, if I had never had that exposure in London or exposure to the LGBT community, I think I still, you know, would probably have carried on, you know, with my boyfriend or whatever. Like, I wasn't not happy. It was just like not realizing. It's like this is going to sound like a real bad like comparison, really corny, I guess, but it's the only way I can explain it, I guess. Like, it's like a flower can grow in the dark, but it just doesn't go so well. But then when you shine the light on it, it's like, oh my gosh, and like goes, you know,
Totally.
it actually can then thrive. So yeah.
Totally. And I think that and I hope that, you know, that it can be the case for anyone who needs that extra light, but that the rugby community, especially the women's rugby community, can be that, like, is just so, like, non-negotiable, is just that community. You know, you can just walk into a rugby team and everyone is just like, bang, like themselves, and doesn't need to hide anything.
100%. And I think, you know, rugby for me, like, and I've seen it firsthand, and I've experienced it firsthand when people are like, oh, so, you know, just in conversation, also, you're like, oh, I'm going to see my girlfriend this weekend, and it doesn't even bat an eyelid. Like, they're like, okay, cool, like, what's her name? Or, oh, you know, I've never ever in rugby felt any form of judgment, any form of worry. Like, I think the only stuff I've had is probably stuff I've put on myself. When looking back, you're like, and what I mean by that is things like changing rooms or showers. Like, especially when I was new to Quins, I was like, well, I don't know. And that was no judgment on Quins. I think it was a new environment for me. So I just wanted to be like, you know, are people nervous? Not nervous, but, you know, would people think, oh, well, she's gay or da da da. But literally it's just like, meh, like rugby is. No one even bats an eyelid. And for my part, it's literally just all your mates, you know, if anything, just having a laugh and a joke and reliving the game and stuff after. Like, it's just been, I've never had any negative comment at all, to be honest. So one thing that I think that I have seen, or I wonder your perception on it, is a lot of girls that play rugby, you get guys that make the assumption that you are gay because you play the sport. Like, have you experienced anything like that at all?
Yeah, you do hear it. I think maybe less so now, but I do remember when I was younger, like, I was always like really, like, me and my brother were really close in age, so we used to go to the games together, and my dad used to bring us both. So I was always just so crazy about rugby, but there was never an option to play rugby. It was like Gaelic football and basketball mainly in my school. But I remember being with my friend, one of my best friends, and we were both obsessed with rugby. We were like, you know, looking through a program, or I don't know, like, we were such losers. We were like, knew all the players' dates of birth and everything. But I remember saying to my friend, like, I can't wait to go play rugby at university, because that was where I thought I would eventually get to play. And I was lucky enough to actually start when I was underage, but I thought I would only get the chance to play rugby when I was in university. And I remember my best friend's older sister being in the room, and she was like, but all the lesbians play rugby. Or, oh, maybe she'd say only lesbians play rugby. So unfazed by what she said, I was just like, wow, that's kind of surprising to hear, but I really don't care. I never thought like, oh no, someone's going to think that I'm a lesbian if I play rugby. Like, first of all, if they do, kind of, so what? Second of all, you know, I'm playing rugby because I love the sport, you know, as opposed to any other reason. But coming from Ireland, I suppose, it's like, having played rugby in Ireland and then having moved to the UK, I've seen a real, like, been really interesting to compare the two. I remember, like, it kind of in my first kind of senior Irish club team that I played in, there were quite a few girls that were in relationships with each other, with a girl in another team, but a lot of it was quite secretive. And that was fine. It was all very much, but I didn't really realize it at the time. It was only kind of when I came to the UK and joined Richmond, which is my first club that I joined. I remember just in general, like, sexual orientation aside, people were so sexually liberal, like talking about their sex lives, sexual orientation, just incredibly open, and no one would bat an eyelid. And I remember that was like kind of the instant difference that I realized between, you know, rugby and kind of the sporting environment in Ireland, and then the sporting environment in the UK, and in England. So to have seen then how far Ireland has come, because, you know, Ireland, like as a Catholic country, like, you know, I went to an all-girls Catholic school as well, and these traditional ideas that have been bashed into Irish people for the last however many centuries. I feel incredibly proud to be Irish and have been part of the movement where Ireland was the first country in the world to vote by referendum, so that the people chose to allow gay marriage in Ireland. And a really funny, like gorgeous story. I actually love this. In Dublin, they were releasing, all around the country, they were releasing the results of the referendum, and they did it by county. So each county would come up, red or green, yes or no. And they started with, you know, Dublin, yes, way. Cork, yes, way. And it went around all the 26, or was it the 32 counties? I'm not sure, but 26 counties. And then there was one right in the Midlands. I think it was Roscommon, County Roscommon. That was like, no. And everyone just like burst out laughing, because I suppose it's just a reminder that, you know, there's still a way to go, and there's still, you know, you can't just change something like that overnight. But that the people of Ireland were eventually just like, you know what, even if I don't agree with gay marriage, or even if I do, the choice isn't mine, the choice is someone else's. And I feel really proud to have been part of the young people's movement in Ireland to like bring that change around. And even since then, I find that stark difference between that I first realized between you know, Ireland and England has kind of started to even out a bit more. So but going back to your original question, do people think you know, oh, it's only lesbians that play rugby or whatever? I think that has gone out the window. I haven't heard that in a really long time. It's a really old school way of looking at things. And I think it's the profile of players and the wide variety of I suppose sexual orientation amongst like high profile players that has just driven the idea that anyone can play rugby.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what's great with rugby, is the inclusivity of it. Like everyone can play, no matter what your strengths or weaknesses, there's a place for you in rugby. And I think, like you said, you know, women's rugby is being played more on a bigger forum. Like we had the big game this year, you know, and it's just pushing it into the forefront of going, you know, this is a great sport that's played by women. And I think that exposure massively is changing people's opinion of, you know, how, you know, of basically changing men's opinion that, yeah, women play the sport to such a high level, and it's so entertaining to watch, let alone play. I just think it's great. But going back to your island bit, like last year, my girlfriend and I decided to go to Belfast Pride actually, rather than London Pride, for that reason. I mean, sorry, Brighton Pride, I think. Yeah, so we had a choice of either doing Pride in the UK, we had a choice last year of doing either Pride in England, or we thought, oh, well, actually, let's go over to Ireland, because we knew that there was a lot, you know, the referendum going on. And for me, I think sometimes you can get swept away. Like I've done London Pride loads, Brighton Pride, and everyone, you know, it's so welcoming and inclusive. And I was like, I know that in Ireland, like you say, my perception was that it was still quite a new concept or a new thing being accepted. And I thought, well, actually, I would love to go over to Ireland, because I've got a lot of Irish relatives, for me to go over there and actually, again, just be involved in that exposure or that conversation to be had. Yeah. Because I think it's really important to just not sit in your comfortable zone. If you want change, you have to, it can get uncomfortable, you know, but then it gets easier because you have those communications and those chats. Mm-hmm. So we went over to Belfast, and a bit like you still get here, you know, if you walk down the street when we're holding hands, you do get some looks like, that's just what happens. So what I'd say is, you know, as a same-sex couple, you still get looks when you walk down the street sometimes. Like you'll see maybe elderly people, or, you know, people that just aren't used to seeing two girls with long hair walking down the street holding hands. Because I think some people have that stereotype of, a bit like I said, you know, with all girls, like you said, like, oh, only lesbians play rugby. There's that perception of, well, gay girls are only, you know, butch or have short hair. Or so when they see two girls walking down the street holding hands that have long hair and aren't necessarily look butch, you do get some looks sometimes. But to be honest, I don't mind that, because it's showing people, no, you know, challenging their maybe their preconceptions.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, again, having only come out, or not come out, realized that I was this way orientated about 9 years ago, I would say I had some preconceptions. You know, having then been involved in the LGBT community, I'd come across really femme girls who would go, oh no, I'm gay. And I'd be like, what? Like, even I have, you know, I had, I should say, preconceptions maybe of what I thought, you know, a lesbian would be, or bisexual, or whatever your orientation would be. But actually, it's just gone to show, like, through the years, that, like I said at the start, like, your sexual orientation has no impact on, not no, but it doesn't like say what your personality is going to be like, or what you like to do, or, you know, if you like to play rugby, or if you like to actually just, I don't know, go shopping, and, you know, whatever. There's no stereotype, there's no right or wrong.
Exactly. And I feel like, you know, you're saying that if someone's kind of, you know, looking at you, actually you can't tell what's going on in their mind. Maybe they're angry because they really think that it's wrong. Maybe they're jealous because they're trapped inside themselves. Maybe they're like, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm seeing. This is the first time I've seen it. Or maybe, you know, there could be a million kind of battles going on in someone's head. And I do think about, like, you know, like Roscommon, who came up red, like that they voted no against gay marriage. There has to have been people that, you know, if you look about like the way you were, and you didn't realize, you know, you were that flower in the dark, because you didn't realize. There are definitely people, you know, in Ireland, all around the world, that didn't get to, you know, they just believe, and it's not their fault, they've just been conditioned to believe that there's only one right way of doing something. So exactly like you say, to challenge that, and as a young person, and, you know, young beautiful females, like, that we can challenge that, is just, I think it's really important for us to do that.
And I think I would say, though, as well, Belfast was so welcoming. We had a great time.
Yeah.
Like we may have got some looks, and like you said, people may have been having that thought process of, oh, you know, they look happy, or maybe it was me actually thinking people were looking when they weren't. But the people that came up and spoke with us and were like, welcome, oh, you're from England, like, have a great time. Like, we had no negativity, like, they were so welcoming. So definitely want to go back. But yeah, we had a great time. But it was brilliant. Brilliant. And it felt really nice that we were, you know, there as they were pushing through that referendum of, you know, same-sex marriage. Like, it was great to see, for sure.
Yeah.
But you were saying earlier about same sex couples being, you know, teammates going out. I actually met my girlfriend through the British Police Rugby team.
Oh wow.
But she actually plays for the DMP Sharks, Malden. So obviously we play them, right?
Yeah.
So obviously conversation was had the night before of, don't you dare sidestep me. And her tackle is better than mine, I imagine. So, well, not imagine, it is better than mine. I'll put my head up to that. And I was like, please don't put me on my ass, because I'll get so upset. But we joke about it. But, you know, same-sex relationships in same team I've seen, and in opposite team, and it doesn't change at all the professionalism or on the pitch. We are both so competitive. Like, literally, I accidentally dislocated a jaw in training one time when we were playing with British Police, because we were both being so stubborn. So basically it was touch.
Oh God. That's where the worst injuries happen.
I'm not going to lie, when I first met her parents, I was like, yes, I'm really sorry I dislocated your daughter's jaw, but it wasn't actually my fault. But so it was touch, and we were just doing this game. We were on opposite teams. And you could straight away, obviously people joke, and they could see we were on opposite teams, and they were like, oh, what's because we're both really competitive. So everyone was like, I wonder what's going to happen. And all it was we were both chasing down the ball. And I think it was rolling and I was running. We were both running towards, and just neither of us would pull out of going for the ball. So we collided, and I'm a bit heavier boned than my other half. So she hit my shoulder with her jaw and then just dislocated her jaw. And I was like, but did I win the ball? Yes, I did. So, you know, she'll say otherwise. Yeah.
I love that, because like, well, you're not going to go easy on each other, because what good does that do anyone? Because, you know, you're pushing each other, obviously. And I think that's really interesting that you're in different Premiership teams, because, you know, like with any of my friends that I would have in other teams, you know, we talk about like the differences and the pros and cons and all. In a relationship where both of you want the best for each other, and you're like, probably like, how do they do it above in DMP, and how do they do it in Harlequins, and like taking the best learnings from each other to make both of you the best players that you can be.
100%. And I think obviously we just want each other to do the best you can. So you've got that extra person you can train with, or be like, oh, you know, we've done this sprint session, what did you do, kind of thing. Obviously not giving away the trade secrets, but if there is any, but just we're so competitive. But that's what I love about her. Like, she pushes me to be better, because I'm like, well, I don't want to go on the pitch and you put me on my ass, thank you very much. So no, yeah, it's great. But I like I think that's great in rugby. Just shows, like, you know, even if your relationship, you know, opposite teams, same team, I just think it doesn't impact on the game as it wouldn't, like you said, you've got loads of mates who are in other Premiership teams. Like I saw that Harlequins put up your try against Leicester, in the big game. And I was like, I bet there was a lot of your Irish comrades that were like, oh, Anna, like, but you're not gonna hate it if you didn't. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know. I always feel a little bit guilty, like, posting about it, because obviously, you know, it was a big win for us. But in general, it was just a big win for women's rugby, like, across the board. So, yeah, look, you know, if we'd lost, I would have been, you know, probably saying the same thing. But, you know, that's the good thing about the women's rugby community. But I feel like, you know, we talk about rugby a lot and how great an environment that women's rugby like constantly pushes for, and even across, you know, rugby in general. But I think we'd probably be naive to say that this environment that we have in women's rugby extends into the men's side of things as well. I don't think they have it as easy. I know that a friend of mine, it's obviously less common in there are so few gay players in comparison to the women's side. And I spoke with a friend of mine about it. He plays for a Premiership side, and he said that if he was gay, he wouldn't come out, which is which is strange, because rugby does, you know, put on that, you know, rugby talks about having a really welcoming environment, and that no one's going to be judged. And, you know, there's such wonderful support in men's rugby around Movember and mental health, and how that conversation is changing perceptions of, you know, what it means to be a man, or what it means to be weak, or anything like that. So I still think that, you know, the environment that you and me are in, where you can really be whoever you want and fancy whoever you want, and no one will change their perception of you. I think that the men's game still has quite a way to go in the players themselves feeling comfortable with it. But I'm glad that the conversations are happening, and that LGBTQ flags are being flown by clubs like Harlequins and you know, across the world, and how you see how rugby clubs across the world have responded to the likes of Israel Folau, and how he's been so outspoken expressing his beliefs, and then how quick the rugby community has been to shut him down. I still think there's that there's a lot of work to be done there. Would you agree, or what do you think about it?
Yeah, I massively think so. I think if you look at the men's game, there is still so much to be done from what I see. And I think, like you said, people feel nervous maybe about coming out. Maybe it's preconceptions from men towards gay men. I think and this is my perception, because obviously I'm not in that world, but I ponder if the way that men in general are brought up, you know, you need to be macho, you need to be this, you know, especially in the men's, you know, rugby seen as a, you know, a man's game kind of thing. And I, you know, and then the perception that gay men may not be that way, even though, like I've said earlier, my perception even was blown, because I had that perception that gay women were meant to be, you know, the butch kind of version, and actually it makes no difference. And I think that's the same with men, and they've got a lot, like you said, I think a long way to go, but I think we're making steps in the right direction. I think it's making that environment that people feel comfortable to take that first step. And I think like I've seen in the last, you know, few years, I think all it takes is like a spark to go, and then you'll see quite a lot of the wave kind of build. You know, once that pebble's been dropped in there, it will build, because I think once one person stands up and you know, owns it. I mean, we do have those already in the men's game, but as more people kind of step up and say, yeah, you know, that's my sexual orientation, you know, and I think that may be wider than rugby. I think that may be just it may be in the male world, that, you know, a lot of them feel like they can't come out because they fear that people will see them more negatively. Whereas I think in general, my perception is that gay women seem to be more accepted somehow in society. So I think that's just my perception, obviously.
And maybe it's through this that have made it a bit easier for, you know, women to be accepted or feel accepted. So maybe it's conversations like this that need to happen amongst male players and within male teams to really, you know, anyone can wave a flag, but how do you really feel deep down? Because I really agree with your point about you know, the sliding scale. I think that it's a strange concept for someone who thinks that they're, you know, definitely one way and someone else is definitely another way. I definitely think the sliding scale is how it's going to be in the future, and that there's not going to be these labels of gay, bi, straight, and that I feel like for in the men's game, I don't know if they would agree. I think they would disagree with us that there's a sliding scale. I think a lot of people would still disagree with us. That, like, how often do you hear, especially in rugby, especially in women's rugby, oh, I thought she was gay, or I thought she was straight, you know, because people don't choose, you know, oh, I'm going to fancy him now, or oh, I like the look of her, so I'm going to fancy her. No, you can't help how you feel. And you've seen it, like even your own story is an example of how, you know, someone can think that they're a certain way, you know, sexually orientated, and then all of a sudden they have feelings for someone that totally takes them by surprise. But it's the environment that allows us to like acknowledge those feelings. And I think we're very lucky in that regard in our environment.
And I think, you know, having gone through the experience myself of coming out, it is scary. Like before you have those conversations, you have that fear of, you know, oh, what if they judge me for this, or what if, you know, what if I really upset them because now, you know, they think I can't have kids, or you know, from my perception, you know, my family are Roman Catholic, and you know, my upbringing was that way, and I was really worried about it. And even my grandma, that was solid Roman Catholic, she was just like, oh yeah, as long as you're happy, that's fine. And I think for a lot of people, you know, and like I said, like the experience that I've had was my worry about, you know, fleeting worry, I should say, about like shower rooms and changing rooms and what people may think, when actually, when I just, you know, just cracked on, it was fine. And I remember like reading this story about a lower level rugby player who came out, and he had been married and he had kids, and apologies, I can't remember the name now, but he talked about his experience of coming to terms with the fact he was gay, and he got really close to taking his life because he was so worried about what his teammates would say and what his wife would say and all of that. And then he came out the other side and he finally felt like he could be, you know, come out and say it. And the reaction of his teammates was one of complete dismay, that he thought that they would feel that way, and almost so sad that he was worried that they would feel that way. And that may be part of it. Like, it's not, you know, it's the making the open for environment thing is to make people hopefully feel like they can see that people would be open and actually maybe not have that preconception that you think they may. But it is a difficult thing to do. Like it's strange, it's scary, but then once you've done it, you're like, oh, like I don't know what I was so worried about. Like,
yeah, that's great.
I hope that, like you said, like the more we talk about it and the more stories like that come out, you know, people are willing to share their stories, especially in the men's game. I hope that more people will start realizing that actually their mates love them. Like your teammates are there for you. Like if you think of how much you put your body on the line in the rugby field, you turning around and going, by the way, I'm gay, they'll go, yeah, cool, but can you get in that ruck, please?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
They'll just probably carry on taking the mick out of the fact that, you know, you missed that pass or something. Like and I'm really glad that it's got to that stage, and I'm hopeful, like you said, that in the men's game, you have more stories shared that will give people more confidence to actually feel like they can come out and be themselves. So.
Yeah, like the stories from, you know, Nigel Owens and Gareth Thomas about their coming out and so late in life, especially for Gareth Thomas, like it's really inspiring. So it's really, like I hope their stories can like inspire. And it already has inspired, you know, male players going forward. But I think, I don't know, I suppose I want to ask you, like, what do you think could still be done? Is there something, how do we make it even better still, like within women's rugby or within rugby or just kind of in life in general? I don't know, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think, like we said, like, it's the exposure and having those difficult conversations, I think, and people being happy to ask the questions. Like, I'm really glad that, like, you know, we can talk, and like as teammates, you can talk amongst each other. But I'm always willing to talk to anyone that wants to ask questions, even if they're difficult ones. And you think, you know, as long as it comes from a good place, it won't be taken as an insult. Like, especially and I think that's the same across the board, like obviously the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on at the moment, and the, you know, BME, people coming out and saying, you know, it's being brought onto the forefront so people feel more happy to have those conversations. And I think you do need to have those conversations, which may be difficult, but that's then when you learn from it, and actually maybe those worries that you had can be removed from an LGBT side. I mean, like, I think it's having that trust and understanding that, yeah, you can ask those questions if you're curious about it, or because sometimes the unknown can be scarier than actually just asking the question. And I think, so what can we do going forward? I think definitely, like, having conversations, if it, you know, with a player, like if you have a teammate that you think, you know, is having a, you know, being quite quiet, or maybe, you know, just have conversations with them, just have chats and be there for each other, just carry on being that supportive network, I think, and keep, you know, being involved as best you can with kind of spreading the love, so to say. But I think it's a difficult one. I haven't really massively, I think it is just kind of keep talking about it, because the more you talk about it, the more it gets normalized for people. And then hopefully in about 10 years, we won't even need to be having these kind of conversations, if that makes sense. It will just be wow, do you remember when we had to, you know, have these conversations, because now it's just accepted that people are just who they are. And I think we're going in that way.